Right, well, good afternoon from the UK to everyone that's arrived for the today's Chorus webinar on change management. My name's Guy Johnson. I'm the training manager of Third Light, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, my name is Marco. I'm the product specialist here at Third Light.
And yeah, we're going to be talking about a number of different things to do with change management. Normally a lot of our webinars revolve around us demonstrating things in Chorus. Not the case today. It's more of a discussion as a topic. So let's just have a quick run through as to how it's going to work today. Pretty simple as ever. Mark and I are saying hello and welcoming you to the call today. We hope you're all staying safe and well. On a positive note, we're now over halfway through 2020. Fingers crossed. Doesn't get too much worse before the end, but it's fair play for making it to this point. But all joking aside, we hope you're well, staying safe, and all your loved ones too. So moving on to what we're going to talk about today in the discussion, and change management's a really interesting topic. Marco and I have been speaking a lot in the last few days about this, and Marco and I have both had experiences of, I think, positive and negative on this. And so Marco, you were saying you've been through a few different processes yourself.
Of course, I think everyone listening and all of us really haven't gone through something, unless you've just started your first job and it's like 1 month in, then maybe you haven't gone through it. But between
a long time ago for me.
Yeah, me too. Unless that's the case, you probably have gone through someone telling you to use different kind of software, change procedures at your job. Even something as simple as having a new client to interface with sometimes, like changing anything that changes the way you do work. Obviously the skill can change massively. Like sometimes it's changing an entire office, right? Hopefully what we talk about today can be useful for a wide range of situations.
So what we're going to do, I think, just to kind of set the scene again, the subject of change management is broad. It links into lots of other things, but something, on a personal level, I feel very strongly about is that, if you've got a positive company culture, you've got, defined values, it's a business where you're encouraging people to have that growth mindset, to look to improve things all the time. Culture is a massive component of this, because I think, having that positive culture will help enable change in an easier way. It's never easy. I think, just to caveat that, it's a difficult subject, it's a difficult process, hence talking about it today. But I just sort of wanted to begin with that as something at Third Light we spent a lot of time on last year, talking about, values, what makes us tick, what we believe in, what we want to do. And that feeds into what we're going to talk about today. And, to begin with, when it comes to change management, something. Go on, Marco. Sorry,
That's fine. One thing I want to stress is that thinking about your company's culture and values is something you should do as soon as you reasonably can. Don't do it like many companies do it, as a reaction to something going wrong, or as to problems arising or people not being happy. Then you look into that. Do it like Third Light did it. Like we were all happy. We're still like very happy work with each other. We didn't really have anything triggering that self-reflection exercise, but we've done it because it's the right thing to do, to build that awareness of what we stand for. And that will help you massively in a situation like change management, because that's where things could arise, that's where problems could arise, and you want to be prepared and know like what lines to stay within, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And on screen, we're going to walk through a total of sort of 8 different key points, and just spend a minute or so on each, just generally discussing them. And I think one, and Mark and I spoke about a lot, whatever it is you're looking to improve, whether that's a process, a piece of software, whatever. What are you trying to improve? What are the goals?
Yeah, no, that's such a key thing, right? And it's often left kind of skipped in a sense, and sort of maybe you have just a vague idea of what you were actually trying to improve. Because a new software is just a solution to something, but if you're not sure what the problem is, it's not likely to really be a good implementation. And it could be anything, not necessarily software, as we said, other stuff as well. What is it that you're trying to solve? Keep your eyes on the prize to an extent, right? You want to make sure you don't do things for the sake of doing them, but you do them to solve something you
Yeah, I
have
think
clearly in mind.
that's you know, a phrase I use quite a lot is pain points. You know, what have you
Hmm.
identified? You know, where the
Yeah.
issue is, and what's the proposed
Yes.
solution? And I think when we talk about, you know, identifying an issue, a problem, something you want to change and fix, it's not just, you know, whether a piece of, you know, this involves people hugely. It's a very people-led process. So you know, who have you identified that's going to help drive this change? You know, manage this process. Who's going to be communicating? You know, the people involved in driving this sort of project are a
Hmm.
fundamentally key point.
Yeah, that's very true. I think every single migration we had, this is an example of change, obviously. I guess I said it's not specifically about chorus or third light, but I've seen a lot of that. There's always been, in the very successful ones, a good idea of why they were doing it, not just because it's a new piece of software, but because the old one wasn't as good as the new one, or the new one could solve some of their pain points, like you said very well. And also, there were clearly people almost in charge, or like that had the responsibility to look after it. And I'd always recommend that someone is particularly involved or in charge with any change, so that you know, things can be done well and in a focused manner to an extent.
Exactly, and I think, you know, leaning from that sort of focus, moving into, you know, articulating to everyone in the business, to all of the different stakeholders, to all of the different potential users, or whoever it might be, but explaining,
Yeah.
you know, why this is happening, what it's going to solve,
Hmm.
what it means for them, and why it's possibly going to improve their role. I think, you know, I can speak as
Yeah.
someone going back a few years where the company I worked for at the time had a particular system they used. We'd used it for years, everyone knew it, and all of a sudden, you know, it's like, no, it's gone, it's going, and you know, this is your new solution, and here's all the training material, off you go. And you know, it
Hmm.
caused reticence straight away. Whereas I think making sure everyone's clear on what it means to them, what it's going to do,
Yeah.
and you know, something Marco and I spoke about at length is that, you know, management of a project at all levels is a, you know, it's a complicated process, and that making sure that, you know, that each level, each layer of stakeholder, you know, it's clearly identified
Hmm.
who's doing what, why they're doing
Yeah. And getting the buy-in from all the involved people. I
it.
remember when I was
Exactly.
working ages ago, working customer service in a call center. That was like a while ago. And I remember we were divided in teams, right? So the same things was rolled out multiple times to different people. And you could see the difference between the team leaders that knew what they were doing and they were getting the buy-in from the agents and getting them to understand and accept the reasons of the change. Those people wouldn't have much problems. And then there were the more sort of lazier team leaders that were just saying, this is changing. And those are the people that were getting much harder time in properly rolling out the new procedures, software, whatever it was. Obviously, that was a company that was changing all the time. So be the right kind of leader, right? Be the kind that
Yeah,
explains, that gets the buy-in, that convinces people instead of telling people that change is coming.
totally. And I think, you know, just referencing back to what we began with, you know, culture, part of the culture, you know,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
definitely.
That's where you want to have the background in knowing like who your people are, what the culture is, what is your company's spirit, the culture, mission, etc. Because all of that will help you at every step of the way in this process.
Exactly. And I think, you know, moving on to the third step, you know, um, you know, these are all key points. That's why we're
Hmm.
discussing them. But, you know, the planning phase, the roadmap, that there's clearly defined goals,
Yeah,
and making sure everyone understands their
absolutely.
part in the process. Marco, actually, we were speaking about an example with a
Mhm.
customer whose
Yeah.
name I shan't mention, so I'll hand over to
Well,
you.
I can say she's in the audience. I can see her name. So I actually want to thank her for being so thorough in planning out. Because as I mentioned, obviously all of you probably know that one of my roles at Light is to take people from a previous piece of software to a new software, and obviously it's a change, right? That takes time. And I've had a very good example from the person in the audience of a very, very thoroughly planned transition, where everything was accounted for. Time for familiarizing with a new piece of software, preparing it, moving the files, getting things rolled out to users, etc. And that's sort of like gonna yield better results than just say, oh, just move things across, we'll figure it out, which can work on small companies, etc. It's fine, but it's not as effective as planning things and being aware of what needs to be done. And as you mentioned here in the slides, being able to measure what's going on, having a good idea of what's working and what not. And as we'll see later in the presentation and the process, also being able prepare yourself to potentially having to correct your course, etc. But
Yeah,
yeah, so
exactly.
planning.
Exactly. I think
Absolutely.
nicely put. And something else we talked about, I mean, those clear steps, targets, goals, but I think the clear steps point, and if you can incentivize things, because,
Yeah.
getting, as you move through this process, you're going to be getting feedback from people, you're going to be getting data. And I think one of the hard parts of this is, interpreting and reacting accordingly. So just moving on to the next part, um, of course,
Mm.
those of you that have attended several of these webinars know that I do generally try and get a training reference in at some point.
At some point.
Funny that, but in terms of the
Yeah.
evaluation element we're talking about here, yes, of course, funnily enough, I think training's an important part of that. I would do,
Yeah.
but there are other things to consider, not just training per se, but do you need to look at different processes, practices, and get those embedded? Have
Yeah.
you, identified all the different resources correctly? Have you got the money for them?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a number of things to think about there.
Yeah. And it's important to know that, and it comes after planning also correctly so, because in a way, even if you plan everything thoroughly, then you need to make sure that your plans, like you don't always have perfect information, right, when you make plans, which is important. It's important to have thorough plans, but need to be open to the idea that maybe you need additional resources. Maybe you thought you could do without training, but it's a good idea to get training, because what you need to know a bit more than what you thought you needed to know, etc. I know just maybe you think, oh, I can just tell my users to play around and they'll figure it out, but sometimes you actually need to purchase training or get some
Totally.
resources. There's many ways for people to get knowledge they need. And again, the same for any kind of change, not just software rollout. When it comes to, say, opening a new office and moving people there, or changing the procedures within your company, like, be open-minded and consider whether, as you put here in the slides, you need more than what you originally planned for.
Yeah. And
And yeah.
I think it's that thing of just being open-minded that, I think, again, let's be blunt here, ladies and gentlemen, we all make plans in life. Life has a funny way of
Mhm.
not following said plans, you know,
Yes.
um, and it's being able to react accordingly. And as Marco said a minute or
Mm.
so ago, to, correctly steer, get back onto the right path. So we'll move on
Mm.
now to the second section of, this has been that sort of really identifying, getting the buy-in, planning things properly, making sure that you've got all of these sort of ancillary things covered. And then, this is
Yeah.
my sort of personal number one,
Yeah.
personally, for me, I think the
Communication. Yeah.
communication at every
Yeah.
stage of this
Absolutely.
process is absolutely vital. And on screen, I've put the words transparency and two-way communication.
Yeah,
And I think that
absolutely. Hmm.
something Mark and I were speaking about is having stuff forced upon us, software-wise potentially, where in other jobs and previous jobs that it's frustrating, and especially when
Hmm.
it's been dropped on you and you have no voice to actually say, well, hang on a minute, we need to do this for our role, and actually it's not doing that. Having
Mm.
clear communication paths, channels, feedback loops. There's so much in this,
Yeah,
but I think, Marco, I know this is something that you're huge on yourself.
absolutely. Absolutely. Both in my personal experience and also what I've seen customers doing. I think there's never enough effort you can put into communication. Honestly, I think every spare ounce of energy and time you have, you should reinvest again into communication. Because especially if you have a wide user base, there's going to be so much value that producing a short video with you talking about the change and what's coming and what they need to do, producing ad hoc guides that guide people through the day to day outside of what a more technical guide from the vendor could come, could be, or just having positive message going out and kind of reiterating and reinforcing the message that the change is good and the change would enable this and that. Um, we
Completely.
we're humans, we're made to communicate, right? We love communication. Most of us love communication, and so that's sort of like where a lot of it will make or break
Yeah.
how open you are. Also listening. People want to vent, people want to complain, and it's fine and valid. Obviously, that's not going to stop a change going through. It doesn't mean that the feelings are not valid. They are. Sometimes people just need to vent a bit before they're
Yeah.
ready to accept,
Yeah, getting
right?
it off your
It's perfectly
chest. And
fine.
and I think,
Yeah.
this all comes back to things we've spoken about already today around that, whatever level you are in this process, right at the bottom, right at the top, right in the middle, being clear
Mm.
on what's expected of you and what your part is, you
Yeah.
know, who's doing what,
Yeah.
when they're doing this for, here are the issues, here are the things that are blocking
Yeah.
us at the moment, here's some proposed solutions, here's some achievements, something we'll talk about shortly, but,
Yeah.
highlighting lots of positive things that way. So moving on, um,
Yeah.
monitoring and managing, and, we've spoken about resistance a bit, and, simply it's fear of the unknown, right? And
Yes, absolutely.
we all, it's a human reaction, it's human nature, and it's about trying to manage that in a positive way. But I think, um, trying to anticipate as best you can possible issues, and giving
Hmm.
everyone the tools as best you can to manage this. And I think, again, when we talk about monitoring, managing, it's not just the feedback from end users and so on. It's, monitoring the performance potentially, um,
If
you know,
possible, yeah.
getting data, analyzing it. Are you having to tweak
Yeah.
things? Over to you, Marco, if you've got anything
Yeah.
to add.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of both getting quantitative and qualitative data. So yeah, obviously you want to have, if possible and realistic and practical, you want to have practical data, right? Having expectations around, if people are using the new solution, if people are following the new procedures, etc. You want to be sure to also keep an eye on what's going on to correct and kind of intervene if you need, but also do get qualitative data. Like we talked about venting a bit earlier, which is sometimes just venting, but do record feelings and qualitative feedback from users, sorry, because they may come in handy, even if it's just for someone's opinion. Just listen to them and keep it in mind. So it's both sort of like hard data, how many people are following the new procedures, are they working, etc. But also feelings, like how are people feeling about new procedures, because then you may have to go back to the previous step and do more communication and help with
Yeah,
that.
and I think
Um,
you've just hit upon something really important there that, Marco, to me, that, you know, I've been in things where I've given feedback before and sort of felt, really quite strongly about it. And
mm,
someone, if you feel passionately about something and someone just dismisses it, it's not a great
yeah,
experience. I think
Exactly.
explaining the reasoning behind the decisions. Look, I understand why you said that, but actually, when we consider A, B, and
Mm.
C, we're going to
Yeah,
have to go with D. But thank you.
so important.
Small things, but it
It's
means a
just
lot.
so important. It means so much, as you said. Like everybody wants to feel and hear that they're being heard and considered. And that doesn't mean doing what people want. It means
Yeah,
making them feel that they haven't wasted their time in talking to you. So yeah,
yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
unfortunately, as much as we'd probably all like that selfishly, you can't get your own way all of the time.
Yeah,
But moving
yeah,
on
it's
to,
true.
the last couple of sections, I think, we've spoken about, I suppose you could argue that some of the language is a bit negative that we've been speaking, frustrations and
Hmm.
monitoring and, things like that. But it's all with a purpose that, it's helping to make sure that this process goes
Hmm.
as smoothly as possible. And a key part of that, we think, is celebrating, the wins and the
Yeah,
achievements and the milestones. If you've planned your project timeline, your roadmap out, as you're ticking off those tasks and moving forward slowly but surely up that roadmap, well done. Well done
yeah,
design, well done marketing, great
yes,
way to encourage people. Again, another snidey training reference, but huge part of my job is giving people confidence to use a piece of software that they don't know. And actually,
mm.
that is half of it. It is the confidence aspect.
Oh, yeah,
And going back to that company culture of, we want you to try things. Failure is allowed. Just learn from it. All of these
yeah,
things
absolutely.
feed into this process. And Marco, I think
Hmm.
it's something
Yeah,
I know you feel strongly about on this, very strongly.
yeah, no, absolutely. I feel that even planning out prices and giving could be a good incentive. Just tell people, um, not just reward, not just, as you said, always celebrating success for everyone, but you could even set and in particular, this person or that person or this team has done so much better, so well that we want to spotlight them even more. I always think, like, in general, I think feelings are much more important than people in professional environment give them credit. In professional environments, especially if you're in corporations, but all the way down sometimes to small companies, people worry too much about, or so much more about, numbers and hard data and productivity and hours worked or what have you. When in reality is people's feelings and relationships and basic human interactions that you do normally in your non-professional life, like telling someone they're doing a good job and truly believing it and worrying about people's happiness, are all things that will improve your workplace in any situation,
Yeah.
and especially when it comes to something like change management, which is where the whole thing could show to be fragile or prone to hurt or things breaking down. That's where you really want to go back to the basics of being a human being and worry about people's emotions as well and feelings,
And
and not just whatever. Yeah.
yeah, totally. I agree with that. I think, one of the sort of the final point really, or number of points, you know, let's of course let's celebrate the wins, right? We've identified the change, we've planned, we've successfully run through this change. Everyone's been communicated to, we've monitored and dealt with issues as they have arisen. We've celebrated, and then hooray, it's all over. Well, no, not really.
Mm,
Launching, I
yeah.
think, is a brilliant achievement, but ensuring that culture of always looking to improve and refine um, is a key way to make sure that change will actually last. Because
Yeah.
you can't stand still. What worked well? What were the opportunities for the next change to work to run even better? And I
It's
think
never over, guy. It's never over.
exactly. And so I know there's one other thing I forgot to mention a moment ago, and I think just coming back to what Marco was talking about in terms of the human side of it all. I think morale in any organisation is hugely important, and I think actually it's worth just taking a moment that when you put staff, customers, whoever through a big change
Mm,
like that, it's hard. it's a stressful process.
Absolutely.
So I think just to finish off on Marco's previous point, that those highlighting key milestones, achievements, it's a great way to actually relieve some of the stress. And
Hmm.
that continuous improvement cycle as a software company ourselves, we can't stand still.
Yeah.
We're constantly iterating, and Marco can speak more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is so true, and it's even more important here. You can't stand still, right? You need to keep swimming forward, or you drown if you don't, right? So, and
No one
when it
wants
comes to
that.
change, yeah, definitely you want to keep an eye out, keep thinking how things have been improved, and yeah, oftentimes by the time you finish rolling out the change, a new one's coming up anyway. So that's
Exactly.
that's how most
Exactly.
situations most people find themselves in anyway. So
Yeah, and I
never
think
let your guard down to an extent.
exactly. Well said. And I think at that point, ladies and gentlemen, with sort of 4 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go, sorry, that we
Mhm.
covered the main points we wanted to cover.
Yeah,
We're just wondering, of course, if there are any queries, questions, whether on what
or
we've been talking about today,
even
or
if people want to pitch in with their own experience, that could be a good situation where you could say something about yourself or what happened to you or to your organization in the past. If you want to add to our to what we said.
absolutely welcome. Also, completely understand, if stage fright's the thing and that you're not so keen on
Mhm.
doing that. But
We're gonna
if
read
there
out your
are any
message. You don't have to
questions,
say it. Yeah,
any queries at
but
all,
yeah.
feel free to ping them into the chat box or unmute yourself and just ask directly.
Yeah, as we look for that, I don't remember we already decided on the next few webinars, did we? Guy.
1 second there, Marcus.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm just catching up. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. I can say first name. Thanks very much for the comment, Linda.
yeah.
Just saying thank you, but
Thank you.
no
Yeah.
questions. I
Thank you,
think
Linda. Yeah.
we're very happy to follow up. I know sometimes with these webinar sessions that you're listening to the two of us talk pretty solidly, for the best part of half an hour. So if there's anything that's come up today that you'd like to follow up with in due course via email, absolutely free
Mhm.
to do so, because we're very happy to talk about anything. And just for the purposes of that on the screen, Danny's not with us today, but Danny's the head of customer success on the right hand side
Yeah.
here, Muggins in the middle here, and then this is Marco here. But our emails are on screen. Feel absolutely free
Yeah.
to get in touch on
And thank you,
anything you'd
Claudia, too.
like
I can see
to.
that she also.
And
Thank you,
yeah,
Claudia, too. I can see that the message. Yeah.
yeah, that's lovely. Oh, Marco, you're getting. I'll let you read that one, seeing as that's about you and the
Okay.
migration.
Well, the one. Thank Linda. Thank you for your second message. Thanking me directly. We've been doing migration recently, me and Linda, for her company organization, and it's been a pleasure for me too, Linda. Elizabeth, how many? There's a question
Yeah,
for you actually,
yeah, I've got
from
that.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth,
I'll read it out, and you want to
I've
answer it
got
now
no, I've
or
got it.
direct?
I've got it. So, in terms of, we recently launched
Read
an.
out the question first, so that people can know what it is about. How many Tela clients are using the training module you have developed? Have you been able to correct those? There's a couple of questions in the quiz that maybe needed to be corrected.
Yeah, there's
Do you
a
want to
previous
talk a bit about
version.
the training module, guy?
So yeah, I've spoken to Elizabeth on that. But yeah, we recently launched the Chorus Learning Academy. So you can take user training in e-learning format now, not just through online sessions with my good self, which frankly gives you guys a lot more flexibility moving forward. If you imagine any of you that have sat through training with me, trying to get everyone's calendars aligned to talk for 90 minutes to 2 hours on chorus it can be tricky. So yeah, really excited to have that
Yeah.
launched. And Elizabeth, to answer your question, not yet, but we're hoping the first ones will be very soon. And yeah, I have updated the questions. So if you go back in, you should see that was a previous version. So everything is working as it should be. So yeah,
Perfect. And Linda, I think I can reply to you directly
Yeah,
on
of
the last
course.
question. This is more
That's
of
the last question, I think, because we're probably about to run out of time. Linda, again, thank
yeah,
you for all your engagement this afternoon. I certainly can speak to you about training for new users. And yeah, I mean, Phil, I'll drop you an email after this, Linda, and if you could just let me know when would be a good time for you, be very happy to have that conversation. Marco, it's 3:30, so thank you for
yeah.
thank you for your time again, as ever, good sir, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
everyone that's come along today. Really appreciate it, and all of your engagement and the kind comments too. It's really lovely. So yeah, nice one. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Thank you, Marco. And yeah, we'll let
Thank
you
you.
guys know in due course about upcoming webinar sessions. So yeah, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, stay safe. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.